were on 3 different routes, or 4 warriors were on 3 different routes, and learning to trust what their armor was telling them and listening to the instructions that they had been given. And we're already at chapter 11 of The Warrior Prince, and we're going to continue on our reading. I hope that everybody's taking care of themselves and enjoying life and having some fun and spending time with their family and getting to just really enjoy being together. So chapter 11, A Helping Hand. Levi was buried up to his waist in the thick, soupy ground that was slowly hardening like concrete. His sinking had slowed, but he was now so far in that he had no hope of escape. "Help!" he yelled as loud as he could, but his voice just bounced back at him as if it had hit a wall. That didn't seem possible, unless there actually were walls around him, walls that he couldn't even see. "Help me!" he shouted over and over, hoping against hope that someone, Ruach perhaps, would come to rescue him. His screams ricocheted back to him unanswered. Wide is the gate that leads to destruction. He had taken the wrong path. He knew that now, but surely Ruach wouldn't just leave him here. Surely he would come and save him. "Ruach, over here, help me!" He paused, but there was still no answer, but his own echoing voice. "I'm sorry, okay? I made a mistake. Please help." Levi heard nothing but the fluttering of wings of the butterflies. More and more of them were landing on the flowers lining the road on either side of him, watching calmly as he tried to get free. Butterflies. They didn't look much like butterflies anymore, with their dark angular wings that looked like they had been cut from pieces of metal. His heartbeat quickened. Brianna's story about the horrible black bugs, which, with their huge stingers, came back to him suddenly. Maybe these things really were like those. Maybe they really existed. "Somebody help me!" Levi called out with a fresh determination. "Hello?" Levi looked around, certain he had heard a voice. It had been very faint. Perhaps he was imagining it, but then he saw something coming through the trees. Someone walking towards him. A kid. "Xavier? Evan? Is that you?" he called out. He couldn't see the boy well at first, but there was something familiar about the way he moved, the way he was dressed. As he got closer, Levi could make out the Tony Hawk design on the t-shirt. It was the same as his own shirt, the one that he'd been wearing at the wreck before grabbing the crest and being sucked into this world. Maybe there was another kid from the wreck here, someone who had come through after him, and he was here in this plastic dome with him. Or maybe Ruach had sent someone here to rescue him. Hope welled up in Levi's heart as the kid came towards him, strolling along as if he had all the time in the world. The kid was carrying a skateboard. Awesome! They could take turns riding it, maybe find a way out of this place. But as the other kid came into focus, Levi began to get confused. He blinked several times. The image he was seeing couldn't be right. He balled up his fists and rubbed his eyes and then looked again. Something was wrong with his vision, certainly. It must be a dream, or maybe he was just seeing things after being stuck here in this crazy world for so long, because what he was seeing was simply impossible. This kid looked exactly like Levi himself. Levi stared, unbelieving, at the other Levi. His face, his clothes, his cool Vans, everything about him was the same. Even the birthmark on the left side of his neck. His birthmark. He opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. It couldn't. It wouldn't. He was looking at a mere image of himself. Other Levi stopped and was looking at him curiously. "Hey man, you in a jam?" It even sounded like him. Levi's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Other Levi walked over to him and set the skateboard down. "Can you talk?" asked the other Levi. A half-smile curved his face. Levi's smile, chipped tooth and all. "Yeah," Levi said, finally swallowing. His mouth was very dry. The shock of seeing himself, or a clone of himself, had made him momentarily forget that he was still stuck in the ground. "But who are you? How did you—" Other Levi crouched down, examining the situation. "Well, you need to get out of there, man. Can I give you a hand?" Other Levi stretched out his hand. "Here, grab on. I'll pull you out." Levi stared at the outstretched arm, his arm, with the same scar on his forearm. He had gotten in a skateboard accident when he was 7, but it couldn't be him, could it? He was convinced that he was hallucinating. Wide is the gate that leads to destruction. Levi didn't know Ruach very well, but he had a feeling that this was not how Ruach would rescue him, if he decided to rescue him at all. Something about this seemed too easy, too convenient, but Levi didn't think he had much of a choice. There was no way he was getting out of this mess if he didn't accept this other Levi's help. He took a breath and he reached out his arm. Other Levi grabbed his hand. His grip was strong and cold. "Pull me up," Levi shouted, using his other hand to get some leverage on the edge of the sinkhole. "Pull me up." But other Levi didn't pull him up. He stood frozen, his hand locked on Levi's. After mounting horror, Levi saw that the clone's hand was changing, hardening. A grayness encompassing the clone's fingertips, spreading down to his palm and his wrists, and it was turning to metal, just like the butterflies had. And the gray from the clone was now spreading to Levi's own hand. He frantically tried to make the clone release his grip, but it was locked on tight. He pulled and pulled, but the more he struggled, the faster the gray metallic coating spread up his arm. So he forced himself to be still. He watched other Levi rapidly changing, its arms and legs becoming wrapped in metal plates held together with rivets, its face disappearing behind an iron mask. Any human features it once had soon morphed into a mechanized parts. Its eyes now just red glowing orbs like the butterflies staring at Levi, pulsing with intensity as if willing Levi's body to change along with it. Levi watched as the gray metal crept up his arm, slowly, steadily. Eventually, he thought, it would cover his whole body. He would look exactly like this ghastly metal thing that held him fast, and there was nothing he could do about it. "Ruach," he called out desperately, "somebody help me." Again, the words echoed back to his own ears, unanswered. Xavier pedaled his feet in the quickening sand, trying to get enough leverage to stay above ground. It was hard, desperate work, but somehow he managed to push himself up far enough to get one knee above the sand. He crawled out and sprawled on the ground, gasping for breath. That was so close, too close. He lay still for a moment, letting the hammering of his heart diminish a little bit. But soon he felt the sand under him start to give way again. He quickly rolled over and crab-walked away before a second patch of quicksand collapsed under him. He wondered if the armor had led him into a trap. He glanced down at his breastplate, which was flickering, the orbs spinning, the words becoming visible. "Follow the way of the armor. It will lead you." "Okay, lead me," he said aloud, as if in an answer to his request. The breastplate focused a beam of light at a space just ahead of him in the shifting sand. Xavier stared at the spot for a moment, uncertain. He didn't know how that practical spot was any safer than where he was right now, but he'd asked, and the armor had answered. He struggled to his feet, and he leaped to the space, half expecting to be sucked down into the sand once again. But that didn't happen. Somehow he was standing on solid ground that looked anything but solid. He gazed down at his feet, amazed. Another spot lit up a couple feet away. Xavier held his breath and leaped again, just making it into the lighted spot. It was solid. Around him the sand was churning, undulating, like waves of the ocean. But wherever the light was, the ground was solid and unmoving. Another light, this one a little farther away. Xavier swung his arms for extra momentum and leaped again. He didn't think he would make it, but somehow he did. It was like jumping from stone to stone in a stream bed, only each time the little stones of light got further away. He had to leap further, and although he didn't think he would be able to do it, he always made it to the next spot. After about 10 leaps, the light suddenly stopped, and the breastplate went dark. Xavier stood on the last spot of light, unsure what to do. His heart raced as he watched the sand continuing to drop away around him. He rapped on the breastplate, trying to get it to work again. Nothing happened. Frustrated, he almost tore it off and threw it away, but he couldn't dislodge it from his shirt. Behind him, the ground had all but collapsed into a dark void. The desert ahead of him continued to roll and turn like the sea, a storm sea. It will lead you. It will. I just have to wait, Xavier thought. Be patient. Wait. It will lead me. It will lead me. He chanted those words over and over to himself, trying not to think about the collapsing ground behind him and the rolling sand ahead of him. The spot under his feet was still solid. At least for now, he wondered how long it would hold up. Follow the way of the armor. He closed his eyes so he wouldn't have to look at the storm anymore. He tried to think about something else. Home, his parents, school starting next week. School. It seemed like 1,000,000 miles away now. He wondered if he would ever get there. Would he go back to his world again? He'd been nervous about starting at a new school, but that was nothing compared to what he was going through since he had come to Hordius. Hordius Ruwak had said that there would be battles, but this was not the sort of battle he had thought he would face. So far the enemy had been falling, trees, lightning, sandstorms, and his own doubts and fears. It didn't feel like a fair fight. It certainly wasn't like the battles he had read about or acted out with his brother or played in video games. There was the enemy, was always a terrible monster or a dragon or a black knight on a horse. Those kinds of enemies were so much easier to recognize, to fight. But this was way harder. Xavier's ears perked up. He heard something new, something different from the constant whine of the sandstorm. It sounded like laughter. His eyes flickered open, and he gazed out into the storm, into the blowing sand. The storm seemed to be clearing like a window unfogging. He could make out a scene, a group of people. Levi and Evan and Brianna, they were sitting at a huge table filled with food of all kinds, a banquet fit for a king or several kings. They were eating and talking happily. The room around them was very grand, like the feasting hall of the castle. Then Xavier's vision zoomed out to the outside of the castle, and then further still to the whole kingdom, the mountains, the valleys, the trees, and the streams. There it was, a path appearing in front of him, a series of stepping stones leading the way through the churning sand to the vision of the city. That was it, the clear path. It was only a few steps away. Soon he'd be in the castle with his friends and his brother, stuffing himself with that wonderful food. He realized then just how hungry and thirsty he was. He was about to leap onto the first stone when something made him hesitate just long enough for Ruwak's words to resonate in his heart. Follow the way of the armor. He looked down at the breastplate. It was still dark. He tapped it again. Was it even on? Maybe the batteries were dead. Ruwak hadn't mentioned having to recharge it. The orb glowed faintly, the words spilling out into the air in front of him. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines your path. His heart wanted to leap down the stone path to the castle to reunite with his brother and his new friends, but the breastplate was not giving him permission. Come on, say something, he said irritably, tapping it harder. He looked up at the scene of food and friends in front of him, then back down at the breastplate. Still nothing. Just wait. Xavier waited. It will lead you down the right path. Frustrated, Xavier threw back his head and looked up towards the sky as he let out a long sigh. His body was angled back just enough for the breastplate to tilt upward. In that moment, it lit up like it was set on fire, emanating a bright white beam of light. But it wasn't directed at the sand before him. It was aimed upward. Xavier's eyes followed the light beam to a tall cliff appearing through the sandstorm, at least 30 feet high. Seriously? You want me to jump up there? He thought to himself. The beam was steady on the cliff's ledge. It would take superpowers to get to the ledge in one jump. He'd never make it. He shuddered as he considered the consequences, falling into the endless pit, being buried in sand. He looked again at the scene of the beautiful kingdom waiting before him. And then he remembered Levi and the wide gate and how inviting and real it had appeared. Lean not on your own understanding. He sighed to himself, only one way to find out. He started to lift one foot off the ground, but his boot felt funny. He looked down and saw a faint reddish glow around the soles of his feet. The bottom of his feet felt very warm. The glow intensified. He thought he saw a flame sprout from the heel. Jump! He looked up again at the ledge. Here goes nothing. He crouched down, took a deep breath. and jumped. The boots seemed to launch him into the air. I could use these on the basketball court, he thought, as he soared easily up to the top of the cliff below him. The sandstorm and the entire desert disappeared from view. He sailed towards the cliff where the light from his breastplate shone. In a moment, he landed gently, like he'd been set down by some friendly giant. He was standing on grass in a sunny meadow. No more sand. The sky was blue. A soft wind caressed his face. It was like he had jumped into a new world completely, a world of peace and rest, like summer vacation. He took a deep breath and then another. He straightened, gazing around him. The land sloped down to the stream bed, edged in tall grass and wildflowers. Big lazy willows leaned over the stream, dipping their long branches into the water. Xavier remembered how thirsty he was. He loped down the hill to the water, knelt and scooped up a handful into his mouth. The water was clear and cold and delicious. He drank as much as he could, and then he lay back in the grass, basking in the shade of the willows. A little rest was all he needed. He'd made it out of the sandstorm, not too much further now. He was sure of it. Around him, butterflies flitted lazily, lots and lots of butterflies. He smiled. His eyes feeling heavy, heavier than they ever had felt. Maybe a nap, he thought. Just a quick one. Chapter 12, Butterfly Kisses. We're going to fall, Brianna yelled to Evan as they hoisted themselves over the top ledge of the building, which had begun to collapse under them. But they didn't fall. The roof didn't collapse. In fact, it wasn't even a roof. It was another landscape altogether, a meadow. The two exhausted kids sat up and gazed around them at the waves of the tall grass and the flowers spread in colors all the way to the edge of the thick forest. No more crashing buildings, no more sinkholes. All was quiet. The only sound was a soft breeze bending the flowers, wafting around them, around their fevered faces. They blinked and stared, unable to get their bearings for a long moment. "Where are we?" Brianna asked. "I don't know," Evan murmured. Brianna reached out a cautious hand towards the ground, feeling around to see if it was solid. Evan did the same thing, making sure that what they were sitting on was going to stay there. "Feels okay," he said after a moment. Brianna touched one of the flowers with the tip of her finger and then tilted it to her nose. "It smells glorious." "Stellar," she said. A butterfly landed on the flower, and she jumped at the sudden movement, half expecting something to fall on her. She almost laughed when she saw that it was only a butterfly. Evan kept looking around, also expecting something awful to happen any moment. He was still trying to figure it all out. "So we climbed up to the roof, and we landed here. So the roof of that building was like a portal?" "Yeah, I guess so." Another butterfly landed near the first one, and they were much bigger than normal butterflies, with wildly colorful wings that glittered in the sun. Brianna smiled, relaxing. She reached out to touch one of them, sure that they would fly away, but they didn't. Evan was still curious as to how they'd managed to climb up the wall. He lifted up one foot to examine the boot. It looked the same as before. There was no evidence of spikes or claws or suction cups or anything that would make them to stick to the wall. "How did these boots do that?" Evan said, more or less to himself. "They're magic boots," Brianna said, her attention still captivated by the butterflies. "Yeah, Rue said we'd have everything we needed. He's full of surprises, that guy." Brianna didn't answer. She was making goo-goo eyes with the butterflies. "Hey, we need to get moving," Evan said, annoyed that she was not really listening to him. "I'm getting hungry." Brianna finally did look at him as if just to realize that he was still there. "Yeah, me too. Come to think of it, and thirsty. I could go for a grape soda." "Grape soda?" Brianna rolled her eyes. "I could go for a big glass of lemonade." More butterflies floated towards them, their glittery wings sparkling as they landed on the wildflowers surrounding them. "Glitter butterflies? No way," Evan said, horrified. "They must be, what do you call them, hallelujahs?" "Hallucinations," said Brianna, shaking her head. "But these are real and so pretty." She leaned in toward the one closest to us. "Hello there, beautiful butterfly. What's your name?" "Oh, please," Evan said. "She's talking to butterflies now." He looked superstitiously at the butterflies. There was something definitely not normal about them. They were as big as birds, and they had a way of staring that made him very uneasy. It wasn't too surprising after all, since pretty much everything was different here than on Earth. "Hey, I don't think we should be messing with those," Evan said, standing up. "We should keep going." "Who says?" asked Brianna, sounding annoyed. "You know what happened the last time we took a break?" "Oh, relax, Evan. You're such a worrywart. We don't even have any direction from the armor yet." "This way," said a soft voice, delicate and sweet as honey. Evan looked around. "Did you say that?" he asked. Brianna shook her head. She hesitated, not sure if she should say what she was thinking, because she wasn't sure how it could be possible. "I think it was a butterfly. I think it talked." Brianna stared at the butterfly, moving a few steps closer. "Follow me." The butterfly flapped its wings, lifted off a flower, and flew a short distance ahead. It landed on another flower, as if waiting for her to follow. The others followed its lead, filling the whole meadow with glorious colors like a moving carpet. "It talked. Did you hear it?" Brianna gulped hard. Never had she imagined, even with her own wild imagination, that anything so marvelous could really happen. "No way," said Evan. But he had heard it too, and it made him even more anxious. "Don't listen to it. We have to wait for the armor." But Brianna didn't seem to hear him at all. She had scampered after the butterflies, which continued to fly away and land again just out of reach. She gasped with delight as she chased them all the way to the edge of the forest. "Come back!" Evan shouted. He chased after her, calling to her to stop. She paid no attention. Evan's breastplate began to blink. He stopped running after Brianna and began turning in a circle until the light stopped, blinking, and became steady. It was pointed in the exact opposite direction of where Brianna was headed. "Hey, look, we need to go this way," he called to Brianna, who was now further away, headed into the woods. "That's not the way." It was too late. She was already gone. "She never listens," Evan said to himself. He looked from his breastplate and then to the woods. Should he go after her on his own, or should he go off on his own or go after her? He couldn't leave her alone. Who knew what sort of trouble she would get herself into? He sighed and turned away from the right path, heading into the trees after Brianna. It was so dark in the woods, he couldn't even see the sky anymore. The trees were tall, with black, evil-looking leaves that reminded him of the forest he and Xavier had run through to get to the cave. There was no sound. The leaves didn't rustle. No birds sang either. The strange butterflies perched on a sapling and low branches and lined up like little soldiers. They did not look colorful here. Their wings had changed to a dull metallic gray. They glared at him with red glowing eyes, beating their wings slowly. Evan took a deep breath and kept walking, searching for Brianna. After a while, he saw her. She was sitting on a tree stump with a lazy grin on her face, her gaze fixed on the same huge butterfly or whatever it was she'd been chasing. Apparently, she didn't even notice that it was no longer glittery. Its red eyes were locked on hers, as if it were controlling her with its laser-like gaze. She seemed to be carrying on a happy conversation that only the two of them could hear. "Brianna," he called over to her. She whirled around to face him, and all the butterflies did too, fixing their beady red eyes on him. It was like they heard him, could understand what he was saying. He felt unnerved by their eerie stares. "Hey, Evan, come say hello to my new friend," Brianna said, waving to him as he came closer. "Brianna, the armor says we need to go that way," Evan said, pointing out of the forest. "Just a few more minutes. Eleanor was just telling me the most wonderful story." "Eleanor?" "That's her name. It's like my favorite name in the whole world. I wish my name was Eleanor." "Brianna, that butterfly, it's not even a butterfly. You need to get away from it right now." "Don't be silly, Evan. She's the sweetest thing. Come over and meet her." Brianna's head was turned towards Evan so that she didn't see her sweet little butterfly, the one that had led her into this place, open its wing and rise up into the air. Evan stared aghast at its large gray body, segmented as if it were armored, and the long tail. Wait a minute. Butterflies didn't have tails, did they? The thick tail curled towards Brianna, and Evan realized that it wasn't a tail. It was like a stinger. He blinked, shocked by what he was seeing. Butterflies weren't supposed to have stingers either. Evan started to run towards Brianna, shouting as he went, "Look out!" He ran as fast as his boots would carry him. "What's the matter?" Brianna turned to look at her beloved butterfly. Her eyes widened in alarm. She realized all at once what it was. It was Mama Buddha, she shrieked. Eleanor made a noise like a cackle and shot a thin silver javelin-like dart at Brianna. Before he even knew what he was doing, Evan threw himself in front of her. He shut his eyes, bracing for the impact of the deadly dart in the middle of his chest. "Evan!" Brianna cried. Evan heard the clang and felt a jolt as the dart knocked him backwards. He sprawled on the ground and lay still, wondering if he was still alive. He took a breath, then another. Apparently he was, but was he wounded? He opened his eyes, looking down at his chest with a wince. The dart wasn't there. It had bounced off his breastplate and ricocheted into a nearby tree. He almost laughed out of sheer gratitude. The breastplate had actually guarded his heart. Brianna rushed over to help him. "Quick! There!" she whispered, indicating a leafy bush, and she quickly helped him to his feet, and the two of them dove into it, covering their heads and staying as still as possible. The evil Eleanor creature was angry. It made a hideous screeching sound, calling the other butterfly things to attention. Brianna peeked out to see the whole bunch of them swarming together, their red laser eyes scanning the forest, their long antennas probing the air. "What are they doing?" Evan asked in a hoarse whisper. "Looking for us." Brianna peered through the leaves. "I read something that butterflies can't see well in the dark, but they can hear with their antennae." She put a finger to her lips, and the two kids stayed as quiet as they possibly could as the butterflies continued to search for them. Brianna was just beginning to wonder how long they could stay perfectly still when her breastplate began to pulse softly. Evan's did too. "What's it doing?" Evan whispered. "I'm not sure." Brianna couldn't see any light coming from the breastplate, but she could feel the subtle, soundless vibrations. Then she thought she understood, and she whispers, "It's telling us which way to go without telling them which way we will go." Evan understood. The two kids began to shift their positions in the bush until the vibration stopped. Evan raised one finger and pointed in that direction. She nodded, understanding. Evan couldn't see any path before them, just black forest. But he thought he heard Ruwak's voice somewhere up in the treetops, perhaps. "You already have everything you need." He took a deep breath. This better work. He held up 3 fingers so Brianna could see his count. He took another breath. Then he lowered 1 finger, then the next, and the last. The two kids jumped up from their hiding place and ran. The butterflies, alerted by their movement, raced after them. Brianna grabbed Evan's hand as they tumbled over the twigs and the brush, keeping their heads down as best they could. Deadly darts sailed past them on all sides, some just inches away from their heads. They kept on running until Brianna spotted a bright splash of sunlight peeking through the dense trees. "There!" she cried. They ran towards the light, finally crashing through the dense undergrowth into the tall, bright grass. They fell forward and lay still, breathing hard, waiting for the angry insects to zero in on them with their evil stingers. But it was quiet. Brianna was the first to take a peek. She saw only pretty sparkly butterflies fluttering among the wildflowers at the edge of the forest. "Where'd they go?" said Evan, still panting from the ordeal. "I don't know. It's like they changed back into butterflies." Brianna couldn't even finish. They sat in the cool grass a long moment trying to get their breath. Evan thought his heart might explode out of his chest. It was beating so fast. Sweat dripping down the side of his face, he wiped it away. "That was close," he said. He glanced over at Brianna, surprised to see her big eyes all watery, like they were filling with tears. "I'm sorry," she sniffed, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to..." Yeah, I know," Evan said. Nothing made him more uncomfortable than seeing a girl cry. "Thank you, Evan, for coming for me." "It's okay." Then Brianna did something truly horrifying. She hugged him. Yuck, he said, pushing away. Don't ever do that again. Oh, sorry, I just was trying to say thanks, she said, deflated. Don't thank me. Thank Rue, said Evan. He gave us the armor, but no more chasing butterflies. Capiche? Capiche? What's that mean? Oh, nothing. Evan stood up, brushing off his pants. What did you call those things? Marachis? Marabutes, she said. She thought about the story she had told Langdon about the marabutes, the big black bugs with stingers the size of ballpoint pens. I didn't think they really existed. Their breastplates began to blink again. Evan swirled around until the light became steady. Come on, he said. We need to keep going. There's no path. It doesn't matter. This is the way the armor is pointing, so we're going. They made their way through the tall grass, searching for the clear path. The meadow seemed endless, but then the ground began to slope downward, which made the going easier. Evan could make out the wide stream below, cool, inviting water, tumbling softly over pebbles. And then he saw something else, something that made his heart nearly burst. Look, he shouted, there's my brother. We're going to leave it there for today. And as we reflect on how each journey has its struggles, nothing was easy. There's always something in our way that we have to battle through, and we have to trust in what God has told us from his word. That's what this story is about. And they are trusting even when it doesn't make sense, what they've been told or what they're instructed to do, when everything else is telling them to go the easy way. Sometimes God's way is the tough way. I hope that you guys enjoy the summer, enjoy the sunshine, enjoy your friends and all the good things of summer. And we'll be seeing you next week when we drop off kits, and we'll be talking to you soon. Take care, guys. Bye.